So every November in the United States, we find ourselves in a time of how to approach and respond to misleading or truly false stories about immigrants from Europe and the indigenous people of what is now the United States. The year 2020 marked the 400th anniversary of the landing of the Mayflower at Provincetown and then Plymouth. Indigenous people did not welcome the Pilgrims in an open arms way that said, "Here, take a lot of our land." Prior to 1492, European rulers and church leaders collaborated on a devastating series of proclamations, which became known as our doctrine of discovery, which is still with us today. In 1452, a papal bull declared that the King of Portugal had the right to conquer any Muslim and pagan peoples and enslave them. See, this is one of those bad things that happen when you mix up church and state, right? A few years later, a second letter declared that all Christian kings of Europe had the right to take lands and possessions of any non-Christian people and keep them in perpetuity. England soon followed, authorizing their explorers to take lands not already claimed by Christian nations. And you may not know this, but the exploration and seizure continues to this day. Actually, you probably do know this. It became the basis of the U.S. Indian law, beginning in 1823, when Chief Justice John Marshall ruled that Christian people, I quote, "Christian people who had discovered the lands of the heathens had assumed the right of dominion and thus had diminished the Indians' rights to complete sovereignty as independent nations." It claimed that Indians merely had the right of occupancy. They could not own their land. This decision was never overturned, and it's still cited today. It took our Unitarian Universalist Association till 2012 to pass a resolution that repudiates the doctrine of discovery. But I will say, better late than never, right? We got there. And I'll also say that went with a whole other series of things going on in our association about addressing Native American people and how they could be more integrated into UU leadership. So we can't change past history, but part of our reconciliation with Indigenous people has to be honesty. That is the one thing we can do. They do not ask us to feel guilty. They do not ask us to gnash our teeth, but they ask that we validate that tribes and nations are still here today. And to acknowledge that although we're not pilgrims or colonists or Puritans, and I know I could probably safely say most of these people in the room do not call themselves Christian, although some do, that we still benefit from the colonization and that those traditions are still with us. I want to say I had a bit of a crisis, well, it's not a crisis of faith, it's a crisis of courage this week when I was trying to choose a story for all ages. There is a beautifully illustrated book about the Pilgrim's Voyage and their first years at Plymouth in our UUFB children's book collection. It's stunning, and I especially like the way they'd opened up the Mayflower so you could see, the kids could see everything that was going on. But it was told from a really white point of view, and it was full of historical inaccuracies. So I thought, well, maybe I could just block off some of the words with the sticky note, right? You saw the sticky note. And then I could just put in some of my own. But then I was like, what would those be? What would I put in there? And then I also really struggled with, is it okay to tell other people's children about massacres of Indigenous people that came along not after Pilgrims and Puritans? I decided not. I decided parents should use their judgment about that. I did go to an amazing website of Classrooms for Change that has a teaching guide to teaching children, to teach to children about Thanksgiving with the word responsibly. And I thought it was very good and very measured. So I wimped out and told the biggest pumpkin ever story. And it's a good story about the two mice thinking they held sole ownership of the pumpkin and how they worked amicably together to share its presentation. and they shared in the glory of winning the contest. But that's not the real story of Thanksgiving. It's the fake one that the author of the book that I really felt like I couldn't use. It's the one she was telling. So our American Thanksgiving is a day of grieving for many Indigenous people. So let us hold them in our hearts. That is another thing we can do today. We can be honest. We can have compassion. We can acknowledge that they are grieving. One of the things Indigenous people want us to do is to realize their tribes and their nations are still here, and that they continue to work in preserving their cultural heritage. They've survived in spite of incredible odds, and for this we can also give thanks. And let us give recognition to Native communities that are still with us. Make a promise to yourself that this year you are going to take in some Native American history or Native American art, Native American culture. You can do that in the privacy of your own home on your couch watching YouTube. But better yet, get out and go exploring. I am making the awkward transition to shifting to talking about Abraham Lincoln and the Thanksgiving Proclamation. These two parts of the sermon are connected tangentially. Sadly, in the proclamation, you will hear the stealing of land from Indigenous people being celebrated. You'll also hear Lincoln's deep Christian commitment. Lincoln established a national holiday in celebration of the victories at Gettysburg. So he was not celebrating the Pilgrim story. He was celebrating the victories at Gettysburg during a dark, dark time. And he was giving instruction about how people could give thanks. I will say the words, it's written in a different century, and I think you can take this in better possibly if you just close your eyes. So Lincoln said, and I had to take a couple paragraphs out because it was just too long. In the midst of civil war of unequaled magnitude and severity, peace has been preserved and harmony has prevailed except in the theater of military conflict. That theater has been greatly contracted by the advancing armies and navies of the Union. Needful diversions of wealth and strength from the field of peaceful industry to the national defense have not arrested the plow, the shuttle, or the ship. The axe has enlarged the borders of our settlements. The mines of iron and coal have yielded even more abundantly than heretofore. The siege and the battlefield and the country rejoicing in the consciousness of augmented strength and vigor, is permitted to expect continuance in years with large increases in freedom. Lincoln goes on to say, no human counsel hath devised, nor hath any mortal hand worked out these great things. They are the gracious gifts from the Most High God. It seemed to me fit and proper that they should be solemnly, reverently, and gratefully acknowledged as with one heart and one voice by the whole of the American people. I do, therefore, invite my fellow citizens in every part of the United States, or at sea or in foreign lands, to set apart and observe the last Thursday of November as a day of thanksgiving and praise. And I recommend to them that while they are offering up ascriptions and blessings, they do so in humble penitence for our national perverseness, disobedience, and to commend to his tender care all those who have become widows, orphans, mourners, or sufferers in the lamentable civil strife in which we are unavoidably engaged. and fervently implore the interposition of the Almighty hand to heal the wounds of the nation and to restore it till the full enjoyment of peace, harmony, tranquility, and union. End of quote. So for all of us who think we are in more trouble now than we have ever been, let us step back to the Civil War. Lincoln hurts with the widows and the orphans and the mourners and the suffering. He calls out for delivery of the country through peace, harmony, tranquility, and union. In the darkest days of his presidency and the incredible loss of lives, he never loses that vision. He calls us to give thanks for whatever is greater than us individually. And for him, that is the Christian God, as it is for some of us. And if the Christian God is not in your belief system, it's something different. It's something bigger than you. It is the community and the union we build together. So for me, I am really shifting my thinking. Thanksgiving is no longer about the pilgrims for me. Thanksgiving from now on, going forward, is going to be about Lincoln's proclamation. It's also a time where I take stock of where I am in relationships with my family, because after all, I'm about to go spend a lot of time with them. There's going to be hours of togetherness. So we have some good history. We have some complicated history. We have some not so nice history. And I'm now at the age that I'm just no longer able to gloss over these things. I'm just calling it like it is. I do that nicely. But again, like I said at the beginning, I'm just doing it truthfully. My extended family of about 24 people who were recently alive or still alive in the Seattle area kind of goes like this. We have a history of alcoholism over here, and those folks are now deceased, but that legacy lives on. We're all still influenced by those past events. We also have a history of spouses who dished out a lot of criticism upon each other in a way that they seem to weirdly, do I dare say enjoy? I don't know. It was just like was so much a part of who they were, but it made the rest of us cringe. And we're like, can you guys do that outside? That was resolved a while ago through a divorce. But the dynamics are certainly not forgotten. We also have micromanagers, and we have people who are incredibly gracious and generous. And then, because things aren't mutually exclusive, we always also have gracious, generous micromanagers. But most of all, we have people who are just people. That's what we have. That's what you have in your family. You have people who are just people. And most of us are doing the best we can. So when you're just people, you've got strengths, you've got flaws, and what annoys one person does not necessarily annoy the next. In my family, we come from a solid history of labor organizers. So we're primarily Democrats, so there isn't too much arguing over politics. But it's been a tough fall, and we're kind of feeling battered by the winds of change. So this year, I want to be especially patient. I want to keep nurturing and well-wishing at the front of my actions. I want to dial down my micromanaging. And when we sit at our Thanksgiving table, when all of you sit at your Thanksgiving table, before we dive into the feast that is there, may it be modest or large, let's stop first and name what we're truly thankful for. May it be the people and light at our tables, and remind us that grace and goodness are still in our lives despite our deep struggles. We can be thankful for relationships we have, for our chosen or our biological families, for our good friends, things that remain in our lives steady. And my blessing for you is that you be loving, faithful, and be as well as you are able to be. And I'm just going to close with some really brief words from Connie Simon, who is a kind, loving, I don't know if she's a micromanager, tell it like it is, African-American Unitarian Universalist. She wrote this during the COVID pandemic. Spirit of life, we have been distressed by economic uncertainty. We have been racked by political divisiveness. We have been troubled by racial injustice and prejudice that continues to divide us at a time where we need each other more than ever. We're tired, and still we are grateful. Grateful for the earth that produces the food we eat, grateful for the hands that grow it, tend it, deliver it, and prepare it. Grateful for our family and friends. Grateful for another and another and another opportunity to begin again in love and mend our relationships. We are grateful for the gift of life itself. Amen.